You're looking good, buddy. He typed chef and my name was first. Yeah, we pay a lot of money to have that happen. No, that's not true. But that's good news. Okay guys, so everybody, thank you again for last week. We had a lot of positive response from our last week's session, and this week we're going to make shrimps Cassia. So we'll talk a little bit about the dish first and how it came about. So for those of you that know me, my daughter's name is Cassia, and at a club that I worked at previous to the club I'm at now, which is the Boulevard Club, the club I was at previously, my director wanted us to name some dishes and he preferred I name them after myself. And I felt really uncomfortable naming the food after myself, so I said, okay, you know what, I'll take an opportunity to name them after my kids. So Cassia, shrimp Cassia was invented. It became a pretty popular dish at the restaurants, and I would do varieties or derivatives of the same dish throughout the year, depending on what season we were in, okay? The dish we're going to do today, we're going to talk a little bit about the product I'm using, but we're also going to talk about the ingredients that go into it, okay? So let's talk a little bit about shrimp and the variety that we're using. So today we're using a tiger shrimp. I'll show you some of the subtle differences between the products, and we'll talk about taste and texture. And they're probably the two that I have here are probably the most common used in our industry. It's a white shrimp and tiger shrimp. Tiger shrimps tend to be a little bit more expensive, a little bit because of where they come from. They're in Southeast Asia, so Thailand, you think of all those places there, and that's where they are farm raised or caught wild. And then the other white shrimp are widely available across North America, okay? My preference is the tiger shrimp. I like the texture a little bit more. It's not quite as sweet as the white shrimp, but the white shrimp I find works well for poaching. So if I'm doing a shrimp cocktail or anything like that, I'll choose the white shrimp over the tiger shrimp, okay? In terms of the look of the shrimp themselves, and let me just put my gloves on first, but in terms of the looks of the shrimp themselves, the main variation is the coloration of the shell, okay? So they both can have bluish to grayish shell color quality, and the main difference again is the tiger shrimp has these beautiful orange stripes that go down the sides, whereas the white shrimp, it's distinctive that they do not, okay? Flavor, these tend to be a little bit sweeter, and they do have firm texture, but they're a little bit softer than the texture. These are generally more firm. Larger the two shrimp, the tiger shrimps tend to grow larger. These grow to about 13 inches. Can you imagine 13-inch tiger shrimp would be massive, almost a foot, or just over a foot. And then these grow between 11 and 12 is probably the largest that they will grow, okay? Some of the size subtleties in terms of the shrimp, I have a little list of them here that if Billy can zoom in on them. So like a colossal shrimp would be considered a shrimp that's 10 or less, and then it goes from jumbo, extra large, large, medium, small, and miniature. So miniature would be 100, and that 100 is 100 per pound, okay? So all these numbers or variations are all based on per pound. So that'd be 10 or more per pound in a colossal shrimp, okay? I'm gonna just take this front page off and we'll talk a little bit about the differences between a lot of people talking about, well, are they prawns? So there are some people that talk about, well, these are not shrimp, they're prawns. And the term is used very loosely in the industry. So prawns are not shrimp. There is a very subtle difference between the two. So a prawn, it mainly has to do with the leg size and the number of legs on the species, as well as the size of the legs. So the legs on a prawn are generally larger. The body tends to be curled a little bit, whereas in a shrimp, it's elongated like this, okay? So these are actually shrimp, not prawns. But the industry tends to call shrimp prawns, maybe because it sounds good on a menu. But in Asia, they call shrimp prawns, okay? But they're not, in terms of the actuality, in terms of what makes up a prawn, these are considered shrimp, okay? Also langoustine. So langoustine, and you'll see a picture here if Billy can zoom in on them. So langoustine have extremely large legs. So again, the main variation In a langoustine, very similar to a prawn in terms of the underbody, but they have these long, protruding claw-like, almost like lobster-like, and they're actually considered a small rock lobster, that they have these elongated claws. So that is not considered a prawn. That is considered a rock lobster, and a prawn would be eliminating those two claws in the front. Okay, so I hope I cleared that up a little bit for everybody. Just a little bit of knowledge for the shrimp that we're using today. Okay, so really we're going to talk now about again some of the sizes. Like this is an enormous prawn, so that's a 6 to 8. Okay, so that would mean there's 6 to 8 of those shrimp per pound, and this is a 16-20. So these are 16 to 20 shrimp per pound. So again, main difference being in what the dish you're preparing and how you want to use them. But in terms of price, it's a massive difference as well. Okay, so this particular shrimp, the 16-20 is $10.50 a pound is what I purchased them for, and these shrimp, the 6 to 8s, is $55 a pound. Each shrimp is about $7.50. Okay, so what we're going to use today are the nice, beautiful, expensive tiger shrimp. Okay, I know I said on the recipe, this will tell you a little bit about what's going on in the industry right now. I know we talked about 8-12s and 13-15s. Those are probably the most common size that we use in the industry for appetizer size portion or for sauteing in a pasta. Completely unavailable. So because of what's going on in the industry and getting product from overseas and stuff like that, completely unavailable. Okay, so I chose to just get 2 varieties of shrimp and 2 sizes so that we can talk about the differences. Okay, I'm going to show you how to peel a shrimp. A lot of fancy lingo in the industry as well is we talk about TO on a bag of shrimp, and that would mean tail on. We also talk about P&D, which would mean peeled and deveined, and I'll show you how to devein a shrimp now. We would also talk about SO, would mean shell on. So you see a lot of that on the bags, and that's exactly what it means. It's just some industry lingo so that you understand exactly what that means, okay? These are called easy peel. So in a bag of shrimp, you can either get them in a block format, that would be frozen in a block, or you can get easy peels IQF, and IQF means individually quick frozen. All of these are quick flash frozen so that we could take 1 or 2 shrimp out at a time as opposed to defrosting a whole block of shrimp, okay? So with the easy peel, the nice thing is they have this slit that goes down the back, so they've already separated the shell for me, okay? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hold on to the tail piece, and I'm going to pull this shrimp back towards me in one piece, okay? Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll the shrimp backwards, and all that's going to do is release the shell all in one piece, okay? And I'm left with a presentation piece of the tail, and the meat is exposed here, okay? All these shells, do we throw them in the garbage? What do you think, Sam? Do we throw them out? So the answer would be no. I'm going to keep these shells, and this is how we make lobster bisque. So this is how we, sorry, a shrimp bisque. This is how we make a bisque soup in the industry. That will roast these shells, put a mirepoix, some tomato paste, some brandy, and produce a stock out of that. It makes a lovely soup, okay? So that's what we're going to do there. We'll keep all my shells. So in terms of the shrimp itself, now I'm going to show you how to devein it, okay? A little trick for presentation as well. This little tail piece in the back, the little point, we can peel that back, take it away as well. You're going to put the tail piece down, and I'm going to separate it, and I'm just going to use the back of my knife, and you'll see that a little bit of the inside of that shell comes out. And what that's going to allow to do is, if I'm frying or if I'm presenting this shrimp, it will allow the tail to stay fanned like that. So you get a beautiful presentation. So if that's important and you'd like it to be a beautiful presentation, then you can do that in advance, okay? If not, it's not important to you, you can just leave the tail as is. There's nothing wrong with it. It still looks beautiful, okay? So the shrimp itself actually has 2 veins. One that runs along the back, and that actually is the intestine. That can contain a lot of grit from the shrimp and what it was eating. And then underneath there's a white vein. The one that's really important for us to get rid of is the one on top, okay? The one underneath is just a vein that would be blood, but it is clear blood and it wouldn't be contained in the shrimp after it's been harvested. but the one on top is the one that I really want to get rid of. The nice thing is with a lot of the shrimp today, what they do is they actually get rid of, they don't feed the shrimp in the last few days before it's harvested. So all that, for the most part of it, it's gone, okay? So you'll see most of this vein is gone in here, but there's just a little tiny bit at the end that I'm going to get rid of, okay? So just that little brown piece here, I'm going to get rid of and just pull that out, and it's gone, okay? So that's as easy as it is. Sometimes it'll run the full length of the body, but I'm just getting rid of the small piece, okay? And now what I'm going to do with that shrimp is I'm just going to butterfly the back of it. And what that does is it will allow this large shrimp to cook evenly and quickly, but it will also give a beautiful presentation. It will open up the shrimp so that it looks larger, even larger than it is right now, okay? So what I'm going to do, hi Christina, how are you? Where's Raj? So we're just gonna butterfly this open here, okay? Billy's gonna let me know whenever you guys have questions, so feel free to ask away, and we can answer some questions along the way, okay? So this shrimp, like I said, all I've done is open up the body a little bit, just so that when that sautés, it's gonna be really, really opened up and large, and it's gonna make the cooking time more even, so that it's not, and the thicker part of the shrimp will cook just as fast as the thinner part, okay? Now what I'm going to do, guys, I'm just going to get rid of what I was using for the shrimp here. I'm just going to put it in the sink, and I'll come back and talk to you guys about the marinade, okay? Any questions, Billy? Okay, I'm going to get rid of my gloves. Okay, and we're good. So what we're going to do with the shrimp here, the bowl's clean, everything's organized. I'm not going to do too much with it in advance. It's really just going to be olive oil, salt, and pepper, okay? So we're just going to get a little bit of our olive oil from the back. Just a little bit. Okay. And the reason why I don't want to put a lot of garlic or anything at this point is because when I saute it in the pan, if there's a lot of that minced garlic on the outside, it could burn. Okay, so just a little bit of seasoning. And cracked black pepper, I said in the recipe, white pepper, really up to you guys. I have both, okay? So I'm just going to marinate those, mix them up with a spoon, just so that I can macerate those flavors, okay? And that's it. And I'm just going to put this aside, okay? So some of the other ingredients that we're going to use for this dish, we're going to use minced garlic, some shallots. We're going to use tarragon, and you'll understand in a minute why I chose tarragon. Some Italian parsley, kosher salt, some butter, and I've chosen black oyster mushrooms, okay? And then for some of the alcohol, white wine, I've chosen white wine and Pernod, and we'll talk a little bit about the Pernod.
Roger says, one question, are larger shrimp less tender than smaller shrimp?
They tend to be, Raj, they can be. So when you're getting really large, and that's why 13, 15 for me is an ideal choice, but if they are quite large, like when you get to a 6 to 8 or anything larger than that, they do tend to be a little bit more firm and a little bit more of a bite, okay? But what we're gonna do is, and you would cook it the same way, we're gonna cook it to perfection so that that shrimp has a little bit of translucency in the center and it allows it to be more moist, okay? Also, on the YouTube channel, guys, you can find a lot of these base recipes. So we have a base tomato sauce that's going to be on there, okay? As well as garlic butter that I produced in advance. Some Italian prosciutto. And then as well we have baguette. Actually, I'm using a ciabatta today. A couple of bay leaves, and I have a little bit of stock here that I didn't mention, but I got it just in case we needed to add it to the sauce itself, okay? So that's it for the ingredients. I'll just bring these over to the stove. Any other questions?
Christina says, what's the difference between white and black pepper?
You know what? White pepper for me, I'll be right back, Christina. Pardon my being away. You know, generally, my rule of thumb is if the dish is more subtle. So for example, I'll use a white fish as an example, okay? A delicate fish with delicate flavor like halibut or cod, I might not choose to use a cracked black pepper. I might use a white pepper because it's not too strong. So black pepper tends to be a little bit stronger, whereas white pepper for me isn't quite as robust. It can be if it's used in extreme, but it's not as harsh initially. So and also the reason chefs use white pepper a lot would be if I was producing a white sauce. So say for example, I'm making a bechamel or a cream sauce or a chowder even. I might not want to see all those specks of black pepper floating around, and it might be a little bit strong or too extreme for the dish, so I might choose a white pepper as opposed to a black pepper, okay? Hope that answers your question. I'll bring this over as well. And I'll bring over my wine and my pepper mill. You see I'm drinking water, guys? Highly unlike me. Usually it's a Diet Coke or other things are up here. So in terms of the, Billy, if you wouldn't mind just putting those over there for me. Thank you. So in terms of the alcohol and some of the herbs that we're using that we'll talk about, okay? So in terms of the, so an ideal wine choice, if you're going to have a glass of wine with dinner, you need something with some acidity to cut through some of that richness of the cream sauce that we're using, okay? So a Chardonnay would be a good choice. Because there's a lot going on in this sauce, so you have Pernod, some of the herbal qualities of tarragon, you need something that'll stand up. So I'd say Chardonnay with a little bit of oaky quality, okay? Something a little bit more, has a little bit more to it than a softer Chardonnay. And then the Pernod, so Pernod, people have asked me in the past, is it okay to use Sambuca? So if you're not familiar with Pernod, it has a strong anise flavor, okay? But it's from France. It's probably, I believe it's the most purchased or used anise flavored liqueur in the world. It's been around for a long time, about 200 years. And what I like about Pernod versus Sambuca for this particular dish, it's not sweet. So it doesn't have that sweetness of a Sambuca, but you still get a really intense licorice flavor. You do not need to use Sambuca if you don't like that anise flavor, but give it a try. It goes fantastic with seafood. As well, when I'm going to be layering some of the flavor, and we'll talk a little bit about that with the herbs, that's where the quality of tarragon comes in, because it does have that strong anise flavor, okay? A great garnish for this dish, other than the mushrooms, would be fennel. Again, another layering of flavor there, right? So we're really trying to bring forward some of that anise flavor to accompany the shrimp, okay? So if you could just put those over there for me as well. And just bring me back the herbs, I'll show everybody what tarragon looks like. Okay, great. So again, the two herbs that we're talking about, so this is tarragon. So tarragon is a soft herb, so it's not as strong as, say, a rosemary or thyme. It has soft leaves. So what I'm going to want to do is pull back the leaf, pull it to the base, and it'll release the herb itself from the stem, okay? So yeah, I can pull this way as well, but you'll see what happens. It starts to pull away the stem. So I'm just going to pull it towards the base, okay? So we'll just chop a little bit of that here. And just a little bit of Italian parsley. I love the flavor of Italian parsley in dishes. I just think it adds a freshness. So I use it a lot, actually. If the guys that work with me will tell you that I do use it quite a bit, okay? The stems of this particular Italian parsley, because it is they're very small leaves, so the stems actually are very soft. So I have no problem if I wanted to chop through it, but I'm still going to remove some of the stronger stems from the parsley, okay? Again, when you go into the video, you'll see a lot, the YouTube channel, you'll see a lot of videos on base techniques. I use that for some of the cooks. But when you're chopping to cut like a chef, what you want to do is curl back those fingers, okay? So curl back the fingers. I position the knife a little bit pointing forward so that it gives less chance of me cutting my fingers. And then I'm running my fingers backwards as I'm slicing, okay? Any other questions, guys?
Somebody asked, Lori says, can you substitute vermouth for white wine?
Actually, vermouth is a fantastic choice for seafood. Noli Prat is a very common use for seafood. It's used quite commonly in some of the seafood dishes in Europe. Okay? So I just have some of the herbs here.
Roger asked, do you prefer Gulf shrimp or Asian Pacific shrimp?
You know what? I've had more use with Asian Pacific, but Gulf shrimp are amazing as well. I found out that more commonly, actually most produced shrimp farmed and raised in the US is a brown shrimp, which honestly I've never used in the past. So either or, Roger, I think would be fine. But for me, I prefer the Asian shrimp Asian tiger shrimp only because I've used them. Have you used a lot of Gulf shrimp? Has Roger used a lot of the Gulf shrimp? So all we're going to do here now, so now I have my herbs, knife in the sleeve here. Just going to clean it up. And what I'm going to produce now is we're just going to talk a little bit about the baguette. So first thing you want to do is have your mise en place, and we talked a little bit about that, have it all in its place. We want to preset our oven to 375, please. So we're going to put, I have convection on this oven, so we're going to preset it to 375, convection on, and we're going to get set up for the garlic toast. So the garlic toast itself, I mentioned that you can do one of two things. You can either produce a garlic butter, which is really, really easy, and I'll put a recipe online for everybody. And all it was garlic salt, some minced garlic, a little bit of parsley, some salted butter, and I added a little bit of kosher salt and a little bit of cracked black pepper, okay? And I'm gonna show you the size that I've cut these baguette. Again, if you're gluten-free and you wanted to do it gluten-free, you could use gluten-free bread as well. A lot of great gluten-free products on the market, okay? So for now, what we're using is we're using an Italian ciabatta, okay? Just something with a nice crust and great textured bread. And the whole idea about putting the bread in the base of this dish, we'll talk about at the end, but it's really so after you complete eating the shrimp, you can use that bread and lap up the sauce that'll be in the bottom of the bowl, okay? So the two ways that you can produce the garlic toast is either with the use of garlic butter. So if you prefer a really intense garlic flavor, you're just going to put a good amount of garlic butter on both sides of this toast. Okay, so I'll do two like this, and I'll do two that has more of a subtle garlic flavor.
Roger said yeah, it was his go-to when he was working in North Carolina.
Was it? Yeah. Is it a local product? Is it something that you guys use because of the availability?
He says he found it sweeter.
Found it sweeter, yeah. And so probably more like a white shrimp. The problem I have with some of the white shrimp is that a lot of the product on the market, it's better now than it used to be, but I always found that there were some that were molting. So molting is when the shrimp is growing larger, it loses the shell, and it really makes the shrimp itself mushy. So I found that the consistency in the tiger shrimp was better than using the white shrimp, and that's why I always chose to go that way. Gulf shrimp, then if they're sweeter, would probably be a fantastic poaching shrimp as well, right? Billy, if you could just pass me the olive oil there, please. Thank you. So I'm going to put a little bit of olive oil in the bowl here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to get a garlic clove, okay? So in traditional Italian cuisine, when you're doing a garlic toast, they really don't use garlic butter, so all they'll do is brush it with a little bit of olive oil. Both sides again, okay? And then what I'm going to do, and I'll just put this aside. I need a new brush, guys. So then what I'll do is I'm going to cut the garlic clove just to expose some of the center. And then I'm just going to rub this garlic along the back of the toast here. And all that's going to do is give it a very subtle garlic flavor. Okay? Just like that. So I'm just going to do that for both, okay? Presentation today, we're going to use a bowl as opposed to a regular plate. A plate is fine, but I really want to have a little bit of sauce left at the end so that I can use the bread that we're going to put down just to be able to take some of that sauce and be able to finish the dish, okay? These shrimp are really, really large, the ones that we're using today. So the chance that I might be only using 2 as opposed to 3 is possible because they are really large shrimp, okay? You just clean up my board here and get rid of it, and then you guys can follow me over to the stove. Any other questions, guys? Raj? Sam's very quiet today. So what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to time this. So I'm getting my oven nice and hot, ready to go. So I'm going to be using the oven shortly, but I don't want to do it before I get to the point where the shrimp are almost there, okay? So I'm going to turn my oven here. Sorry, my stove, I'm going to turn it on, low to medium heat. And then we're going to start just by adding a little bit of olive oil. Okay, just a little bit of olive oil.
Sam says he's just watching and salivating.
That's because of these, Sam. Look at these. They're enormous. Really, really great shrimp. Pardon my back, guys. Okay. So what I'm going to start off with first is I'm not going to start with shallots and garlic in the pan, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to start with our shrimp. And there's a reason for that. I'm going to give it just a little bit more time. It's not quite there. There's a reason for using doing the shrimp first is because I want to start the cooking process with the shrimps. I do not want to continue finishing them in the sauce, okay? So I'm going to take them out when they get started so that I don't overcook them. Shrimp should be cooked just so that there is some translucency in the center. They shouldn't be cooked for a long period of time, okay? That's when you tend to have a dish where the shrimp are really tough. Okay. So again, now we have a little bit more heat in the pan. We're going to start sauteing these shrimp. And you're going to see when I start sauteing them that the shrimp are going to open wide because they're butterflied, right? So they're going to open up completely.
Sam says, here's a question. Where's Cassia for the shrimps, Cassia?
Cassia is actually, you missed it. So Cassia actually is my daughter.
Right there, you got it.
Pardon me? Yeah, Cassie's my daughter, okay? So you see now, if you want to come in here a little bit, Billy, you'll see now that the shrimp are really starting to open. Okay, like they are just enormous. So I'll show you here. Like, I mean, those shrimp are huge. Okay, and that's because we butterflied them open. So I'm just going to lightly saute them on both sides. Okay, just to get the process started and add a little bit of flavor to that pan. Okay. There you go. Right, like beautiful. Okay, Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove them. Okay? Now that I've got some of that beautiful shrimp flavor started, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start developing layers of flavor in the pan, okay? So now I'm going to start with my, nice catch, I'm going to start with my shallots. Choice of shallots versus onion, can you tell me why, Raj? So I'm just going to sweat this off a little bit just to develop some of the flavor. So until they go translucent, I don't want any color.
Susan says tips on how to butterfly.
You know what, Susan? We just took the knife down the center. Sorry guys, I'm just going to add a little bit of garlic now. We took the knife down the center and just followed the center line where we deveined the shrimp. So that we could open it up a little bit larger, and it allowed me to open it up so it looked larger. So we added the garlic. Now we're adding some Pernod. Now you be careful because it can flame. Has I think 40% alcohol, Pernod. So it can flame, but I'm going to try to cook down some of this Pernod.
Laurie says, how would you butterfly smaller shrimp?
Same process. A little bit more tedious because they are much smaller, but the process is the same. And the nice thing about the smaller shrimp is the deveining process is virtually nothing. So there's no vein that you'd have to worry about in the back, but if you just take them and open them up a little bit in the center, they do the same thing. So they'd open up quite a bit. Like, I mean, look at this shrimp now. It looks enormous, right? So it really is large now, okay?
And Roger asks, what's your advice on specific shrimp size for different shrimp dishes?
So actually, that's a great question, Raj. So if I was doing a surf and turf, this was probably the size shrimp that I might use, that I could give one on top of a fillet, and it'd be more pronounced, and it'd be that wow factor. So for like doing a shrimp salad, say for example, on a buffet, you could use even a 3140, even a little bit smaller is fine. I don't usually get into Maytang shrimp or anything like that, like the really, really small shrimp, unless I'm doing something for a sandwich, like a croissant or something like that. But generally for the pastas and dishes that require more than one shrimp, I like the size 13-15. I think it's ideal. Because 13-15 is probably the most common size, it's more expensive. So they mark the price up, supply and demand. They mark the price up quite a bit, right? I'll see if this flames off a little bit. I think almost the alcohol is burnt off. But they mark the price up a little bit, so you can go to a 16-20 and save some money, okay?
And he answered your shallot question from earlier. He says shallots is a cross between garlic and onions. They're sweeter, and they have a sweeter flavor.
They do have a sweeter flavor. They're milder, right? They're much milder. Okay, so now that my Pernod has almost completely, I'm down to about a third of the liquid left in the pan. Now I'm going to add some of my wine, okay? So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add some of my wine, okay? And I'm going to bring that down to half. At this point, I'm going to start putting my baguette in the oven, okay? Because we're about halfway. We can take it out earlier, but I'm about halfway on the dish right now. So that's just going to go in the oven, and we're going to start toasting that off, okay? I mentioned to you before that I organized a little bit of chicken stock. More because last night, I don't know if you guys saw, I made arancini last night, and we were using some of the stocks for the risotto. So I had some stock left over, so I chose to keep some because I want to show you how you can use the stock in the dish as well. So it can be either a fish stock, or even with those shrimp shells, roast those shrimp shells and produce a stock out of them. It'd be fantastic here. But because I had chicken, I'm using chicken. Okay. So now I'm bringing down the wine, and now when the wine goes down to about half, now I'm going to use a little bit of the stock, okay? Just a little bit. And I can use it if the sauce is a little bit too thick. I can use it as well to thin out the sauce a little bit, okay?
Roger asks, do you prefer dry or sweet wine?
You know what, for this dish, I prefer dry. But again, great question, Raj. I wouldn't use a sweet wine in this particular dish. Sweet wine, depending on what I'm using it for, I might use it in a dessert application, but not for the seafood dish. Okay, so now when we get everything to that point, French influence, add some bay leaf, and now I'm going to start developing the base flavors of the sauce, okay? So now I'm going to add tomato. So that's that tomato base we talked about, okay? And I'm going to allow that to incorporate as well. And all these recipes are available for you guys, okay? So I'm not sure if you guys had an opportunity to see them before you started today. Add a little bit more tomato. Okay. And when the tomato's in there, now I'm going to add my cream. Okay. Good alternative to cream. If you didn't want to use a heavy cream in this particular sauce, what you can use is, again, made some lemonade. So if you use some yogurt at the end, so you make the sauce, instead of reducing it, cooking it out, it could split on you. But I would fold in or whisk in a little bit of yogurt at the end would be a great alternative. You can make a base cream sauce by producing a roux, but using a low-fat milk as opposed to using a heavy cream. But you won't get the richness, obviously, and the decadence of the final product won't be the same at all. Okay.
Susan says, I was late joining. Is that pureed tomato?
No, this is actually a base tomato sauce that we have on the YouTube channel. So it's an old school, very traditional base Italian tomato sauce. Okay, so now really all I'm looking to do is I'm going to turn down the heat a little bit, and I'm just going to simmer this sauce, okay? So I don't want to, all sauces are going to take time to develop flavor, so I don't want to cook it too fast. I want to allow the flavors to come together. So I'm really taking its time and getting it to the point where it's almost coating the back of a spoon, and then I'm going to put my shrimp back in and finish with the rest of my garnishes. So my mushrooms, my tarragon, and my parsley, and a little bit of butter to, again, give a little bit more richness to that dish, okay? And you'll see where the prosciutto comes in at the end. I'll just get rid of some of this stuff here so that we can present. The dish that we're going to use today, I mentioned to you we're going to use a bowl. But it's perfectly fine if you feel like using a plate as opposed to a bowl. I just like to have a little bit extra sauce in the bottom, just so that you can have that bread to absorb some of that sauce.
Susan asks, would you use lobster in this recipe?
Absolutely. The difference is I would just poach the lobster long enough to take the meat out of the shell, have it organized, produce the sauce, and add it in at the very last moment. Much like what we're doing with the shrimp here, lobster is pretty unforgiving. If you butter poached it again, it would be even better, and then just add it into a finished sauce, it'd be amazing. But because you don't want to overcook it, you really have to get ready in advance and then add it into the final sauce, okay? The other thing you can do as well, when I was sauteing my ingredients in the beginning, like my garlic and my shallots and stuff like that, you can saute your mushrooms if you want to then. The only thing that I find is when I do that, if it's simmering away in this particular sauce, oyster mushrooms have a way of really getting too soft and overcooked. So I chose to add it in just at the end when the sauce is ready, okay? Fresh peas, more available in June. Fresh peas are ideal. I'm using frozen. But fresh peas, if you were using them, I would be adding them at the point that I added the wine in that as well, just to allow them to soften a little bit, but you don't want to overcook them. You want that little bit of a pop. Okay. So my sauce is pretty close. So what I'm going to start doing now at this point is I'm going to start adding the rest of my ingredients, okay? So the mushrooms for sure. I'm going to add in some of my mushrooms, okay? Just like that. I'm going to add back in my shrimp. Now I'm going to allow them to cook in the sauce, okay? I'm going to add in some tarragon and some Italian parsley. Because these peas are frozen, I'm going to wait till the very, very end to add them, okay? Can you pass me the wood board, please, just so when I'm plating on the other side, it doesn't go on the table? Thank you. So I'm just making sure the shrimp are well coated. And when we were talking about the sauce being a little bit too thick and what we would have to do, I'll show you that as well now. Okay. It's starting to tighten up a little bit here, so all I'm going to do is add just a touch of stock. Okay? Just to give me an extra couple of minutes in the sauce here. There we go. Beautiful. And you can really see how those shrimps have really become large. Okay, now at this point, the shrimp are, I would say, about 70% cooked now. They won't take long, especially now that they're butterfly. I'm going to add a little bit of those spring green peas and a couple of knobs of butter. Okay, and I'm just going to turn off the dish. So I'm not going to cook it anymore. I'm just going to make sure that all these shrimp are coated with the sauce. And I'm just going to allow them to sit in the sauce here, just so that they cook. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to taste the sauce, okay? And now is when I'm going to adjust the seasoning. So like we talked about, a little bit of kosher salt. Actually, it tastes really great. A little bit of cracked black pepper. Or white pepper, whatever you choose, okay? So I'm just going to swirl in the butter. And that'll be good to go to the plate. So I'm going to check on our garlic toast now. With the garlic toast, you don't want it too dry. So I'm not looking to achieve like a crouton consistency. I want it to be soft but warm and a little bit more crunch on the outside, okay? Okay, I'm just going to bring everything over here now to plate. You know, I'm going to use this dish today. Okay. Oh, guys, if you could smell this, like you really get the anise enhancement from the tarragon and from the Pernod. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you, bring it to the plate. So in terms of the prosciutto, let me just grab my knife here. Any other questions, Billy?
Vinci says, similar to Susan's question, would you recommend the same recipe when cooking with mussels or clams?
Yeah, it would work perfectly, Vinci, actually. Would really, really work well. So in terms of the baguette itself, all I'm going to do is cross over 2 pieces here in the base of the dish, okay? Let me just get rid of that. Then the shrimp themselves, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to perch them on top. Yeah, they're cooked perfectly. Just going to perch them on top of that bread, okay? So what I'm going to do, this one is just absolutely massive. So what I'm going to do is just perch it a little bit so it's standing up. It gives me a little bit of height. And this one will be just resting down the side, okay? Just like that. Then what I'm going to do is take the prosciutto that I had prearranged. I'm just going to get organized. A couple of pieces of prosciutto, and I've just cut those in half. Okay. The sauce, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to spill it down over the shrimp. Obviously, fresh peas are much better. I actually thought I would have some luck and talked to my veg purveyor, and he mentioned to me that due to everything going on, obviously they're not bringing it up this year right away because there's no need. So completely understandable. Okay. So just drizzle it down the side. There's no right or wrong way to do this, guys.
Roger asks, would you make this with pasta? And if so, what pasta would you recommend?
For a shrimp dish like this, again, a preference. For me, I absolutely love the wide ribbon noodles, so like a pappardelle or something like that I think is outstanding. But again, preference. You could do it with a prosciutto, with a penne, with a rigatoni, maybe not a rigatoni, but a penne for sure. But I love the extruded pasta, so I would say a pappardelle. So for the prosciutto, I just garnish with a couple of small pieces prosciutto. And again, this is going to give you that saltiness to the dish. Okay, I'm just going to clean up my plate here. I'm going to do some beautiful garnishes with some micro herbs and tendrils. So I have some pea tendril here. I have a little bit of baby sorrel. Okay, so baby sorrel can go on the side. And then all I'm going to do is finish with a little bit of olive oil. Okay, so let me just get rid of that. So a little bit of olive oil around. In the old days, we would have sprinkled everything around the plate. Not anymore. Okay? And that's it. Okay, guys? So there is, named after my daughter, Shrimp Cassia, with prosciutto, English peas. We have Pernod, some tomato cream, and some beautiful tiger prawns. Okay? Please join us next week. We've had a lot of requests for our veal meatball recipe. We're going to do a puttanesca sauce with the veal meatballs and some Italian parm. Are there any more questions?
Yeah, you've got one more question
Sure.
from Roger. Who's your veg purveyor?
Actually, I use a couple. So we've just started working closely with Fresh Start, and I use Terra Produce, who is a purveyor. I think you know them as well, Raj, but they're amazing. They do an outstanding job. Terra is my main distributor. There you go, guys. Shrimps Cassia. Hope you make it at home and enjoy, and thank you so much everybody for joining me. Join in next week, okay? Thank you guys.